Today's episode is sponsored by Dashlane. Try Dashlane for free on your first device, and when you decide you want to upgrade to premium, use my code BRAINFOOD to get a discount of 10% on premium. More on them in a bit. Mein Kampf, the autobiographical anti-Semitic hate-manifesto written by Adolf Hitler in the 1920s. Wow, this video is not getting monetized, is it? First line, Mein Kampf. It's one of the most controversial and infamous books of all time. As you might imagine, despite how inherently poorly written it is, this has resulted in millions of copies of the book being sold since Hitler did the world a major favour and heroically, and with no regard for his own personal safety, managed to infiltrate the Führerbunker and take out one of the most hated individuals of all time, himself, in 1945. Bada-boom-boom. So, ever since Hitler fired a wall for PPK at his own head, who's been collecting the royalties from sales of the book? How much did Hitler make off it before that? And why did he write it in the first place? Also, isn't a wall for PPK James Bond's gun? Hitler initially began dictating and drafting the outline to Mein Kampf while imprisoned in 1923 after a failed attempt to seize power in Bavaria in a coup d'etat, which eventually became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. Conceived by Hitler as a way of simultaneously spreading Nazi ideals and paying off the massive debts he had racked up, the future Führer realistically expected that his book would only primarily appeal to those who were either in or sympathetic to the National Socialist Party. For the most part, Hitler was right, hashtag Simon Whistler taken out of context, and upon its release in 1925 it sold a modest 9,000 copies. Nevertheless, it earned him a nice little income. Over the next few years, as Hitler's star rose in German politics, sales of his book similarly increased. Legitimate sales of the book peaked in 1933, the year Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, with a reported 850,000 copies being sold that year. In total, it's estimated that around 10 million copies of the book were sold during Hitler's lifetime. Padding these totals significantly, though, when Hitler became Führer, meaning leader or guide. Millions of copies of the book were purchased by the German government and were distributed for free to German soldiers and newly married couples. Yay! In doing this, you imagine being a recently married Jewish couple in Germany, be like, this is gonna go well, is it? In doing this, Hitler ensured that he earned royalties for every one of the free books handed out by the government by declaring that local authorities had to pay to cover the book's cost before giving them away. Corruption. It's difficult to determine exactly how much Hitler earned from all of these sales, but according to the documentary Hitler's Money, great name for a documentary, the total rang in at just under 8 million Reichmarks. Equally difficult for a variety of reasons is converting that amount to modern-day dollars or pounds, but as an extremely rough estimate, 8 million Reichmarks in the early 1940s would be equivalent to around $30 million at that time, or around $430 million, that's £279 today. Whatever the case, given Hitler's fairly lavish lifestyle in the immediate years leading up to and then later including his time as leader of Germany, and with most of his personal income coming from the book sales in the early going, it would seem that his bank account was doing just a bit alright. Of course, we should note that this doesn't take into account all of the money Hitler later acquired through various other means, such as licensing his image to the German government, earning him money every time they sold a stamp or other item with his face on it. Hitler also decided to maximize his personal income by simply not bothering to pay his taxes. This created something of a problem for him initially, but he managed to string along the German tax office for years, at one point brashly claiming that he only owned one desk and 2 bookshelves, while simultaneously driving around in a brand new Mercedes. At other times, he kept the tax officials at bay by insisting he'd pay off his tax bill in installments over time. This all culminated in Hitler receiving a tax bill of 405,500 Reichsmarks shortly after he became Chancellor in 1933. For reference, the average annual teacher salary in Germany at this time was a little under 5,000 Reichsmarks, so he owed them a lot. Still not wanting to pay his taxes, though, and now being in charge, he promptly had a representative of the Ministry of Finance declare that the Führer was free of tax obligations, and the massive tax debt it accumulated was waived, along with the future taxes that he'd have otherwise owed. While sales of Mein Kampf internationally were decidedly more modest, Hitler still made considerable amounts of money from them before the start of World War II, with it being noted that he made somewhere in the region of 500,000 inflation-adjusted dollars from sales of the book in the UK alone. Come on, UK, what are you doing? Don't buy Mein Kampf. So what about after he died? As Hitler was officially a resident of Munich upon his death, the Bavarian government seized all of his property, including the rights to the book, and immediately outlawed its publication in Germany. Despite this, the book is still published and sold with some success throughout the world today, at least where it is not banned. As the legal copyright holder in many parts of the world, with a couple of caveats we'll get into shortly, Bavaria was entitled to any royalties from such sales, and they did accept them, albeit begrudgingly, before giving them to charity. That said, when Hitler died, his will instructed that any objects of sentimental value or necessary for the maintenance of a modest, simple life be split among his living relatives and friends, while his art collection and remaining assets be split between an art gallery in his hometown of Linz and the National Socialist German Workers' Party, respectively. However, the Bavarian government decided to ignore this will as part of what we like to dub their commendable Screw Hitler initiative. They just decided to take full ownership of anything because f*** that guy. While legally some of Hitler's distant heirs could lay claim to what remains of Hitler's estate, which is still estimated to be worth millions, none of them are willing to do so. No surprise there, it's not going to look good. In fact, apart from not wanting anything to do with Hitler's estate, the sons of Hitler's nephew have allegedly even gone so far as to agree to never have children to end his bloodline. It's a bit ironic if true, given it then emphasizes a lot of stock put in one's bloodline. More on Hitler's British nephew, who somehow managed to fight in the war in the US military, in the bonus facts in just a bit. While rights to Mein Kampf from his death until recently belonged to the Bavarian government throughout most of the world, in the UK and the US things were a little bit different. In the UK, rights to the book belonged to Hurst and Blackett, who purchased rights to a translated version of the book from Hitler's publisher in 1933. When Hitler died, Hurst and Blackett retained the rights and continued to sell copies of it to this day, though now under the name Random House, a publisher which bought them out in 1998. However, the company, unwilling to profit from a work of Hitler's, has for some time gifted all royalties made from the book to an anonymous charity. In 2001, it was revealed that the charity in question was the German Welfare Council. That council then stated they were planning to return £250,000 of the £500,000 they'd received over the years via book royalty donations. This came as a response to the controversy that erupted to their ever having accepted such funds and being confronted by various prominent individuals, including the chairman of the Holocaust Education Trust, who felt that profiting in any way from such a book was inherently wrong, even if the money was being used for good. The £250,000 they'd already used from the sales of the book had been given to aid Holocaust survivors. The Welfare Council stated of all this, "When we agreed in 1976 to the arrangements, the generally accepted view was that there was a moral obligation to pass the money to Holocaust victims, but no Jewish charity would take it. The current Board of Trustees, however, has decided the funding is no longer appropriate, not least because we no longer deal exclusively with Holocaust victims. The charity was chosen because of its work with Jewish refugees from Germany, but their number has diminished greatly over the years. Most have died of old age. The problem now is that no one wants anything to do with the money." Upon learning that the Welfare Council would be returning the money, Random House decided that they would distribute the unwanted funds and any subsequent royalties to another appropriate charity. As to why the German Welfare Council had so much remaining from the donated book royalties, it was explained that we kept it in a separate bank account from other donations and used it only in emergencies. Holocaust victims who were helped by the charity may not have known about the donation, and I fear some might be offended. In America, royalties to Mein Kampf were collected by Horton Mifflin, who bought the rights to the book from Hitler's publisher in 1933. Interestingly, at least two other publishers, Stackpole and Raynal and Hitchcock, are known to have published unlicensed translations of the book in the 1930s by arguing that because Hitler self-identified as a stateless German, his book wasn't copyrightable. Neither of these publishers paid any royalty to Hitler. In fact, Stackpole advertised the book by explicitly stating Hitler wasn't getting anything from the sales of their version. At the start of World War II, the American government seized all profits and rights to the book within the country. The government then held the rights to Mein Kampf until 1979. During this span, they made about $139,000 in royalties, with this money being placed into the War Claims Fund before being paid out to victims of the war. In 1979, Houghton Mifflin paid the US government $37,254 to quietly buy back the rights, earning them an estimated $700,000 in royalties over the next 2 decades. However, when it emerged that the company had been making hundreds of thousands of dollars from sales of the book, they issued a statement stating that the royalties the book earns would be distributed to charities that promised diversity and cross-cultural understanding, and a host of other things Hitler would have probably hated. The Red Cross, founded by Henry Dunant with the intent to prevent and alleviate human suffering without discrimination, was one candidate for receiving royalties from the US sales, but like so many before him, the organization reportedly declined the money. As for today, thanks to European copyright law, Mein Kampf entered the public domain on the 1st of January 2016, so now who earns the royalties depends on the edition, and anyone can create one. For example, once the copyright expired, the Institute for Contemporary History in Munich, which is funded by the German government, almost immediately published a version they'd been working on for a few years, intended to be the definitive academic edition. This version is an astounding 2,000 plus pages and includes well over 3,000 annotations to help educate on the context of various statements and things like that. The controversy, of course, was widespread after this academic edition became a bestseller, in the first year alone selling almost 100,000 copies, including sitting for 35 weeks on the German bestseller list, among others. The sales numbers all came as a huge shock to the History Institute, who had expected it to only sell a few thousand copies, mainly to professors, libraries, and the like, especially given its hefty textbook-like price of almost €60. Thus, given now anyone can make their own edition, as you might imagine, who gets the royalties from Hitler's hymnal of hate hasn't become any less complicated or controversial since it entered the public domain. And speaking of controversy and Hitler, you'll often hear that Time magazine was lambasted for naming Hitler Man of the Year in 1938. However, contrary to popular perception, this was not at all to honor Hitler, but rather to bring more public attention to the atrocities he was committing. They specifically stated, "Lesser men of the year seemed small indeed beside the Führer." Germany's 700,000 Jews have been tortured physically, robbed of homes and properties, denied a chance to earn a living, chased off the streets. Now they are being held for ransom, a gangster trick through the ages. They ended their article on their decision to name Hitler Man of the Year on the ominous note, "To those who watched the closing events of the year, it seemed more than probable that the man of 1938 may make 1939 a year to be remembered." Time magazine certainly nailed that one. Speaking of nailing things, though, Dashlane, who absolutely nail protecting your passwords and your online identity. Dashlane is a one-stop shop for all your digital identity protection needs. If all your passwords are the same, which is a bad idea, you can use Dashlane's password manager to create and securely store complex and unique passwords, making it less likely that your accounts are gonna get compromised. They also have a VPN as part of their service, meaning that you can browse the internet securely and confidently, even on public Wi-Fi. But it's not just that, they also actively monitor the dark web to see if your information has been leaked somewhere. That means you can go in and change your password before someone breaks into other accounts that share that same password. Plus, Dashlane does what it's always done. It stores your passwords, it keeps your personal data secure, it fills all those annoying boxes for payment info or passwords for you. So, make your life easier and head to dashlane.com/brainfood to try Dashlane for free on your first device. And when you decide you want to upgrade to premium, use our code BRAINFOOD to get a discount of 10%. And let's get into that bonus fact. Going back to Hitler's nephew, he was originally named William Patrick Hitler, but he later changed it to William Patrick Stewart Houston to distance himself from his uncle's name after World War II. William was born in Liverpool, the son of Adolf Hitler's half-brother, Alois Hitler Jr., and an Irish woman named Bridget Dowling. Prior to World War II, William moved from England to Germany, where Adolf Hitler got him a job in a bank, which he subsequently left after convincing Hitler to get him a job at an automobile factory as a salesman. At this point, Hitler began calling him my loathsome nephew and began publicly calling him out, stating, "I didn't become chancellor for the benefit of my family. No one is going to climb on my back." Getting nowhere further with his uncle, William then returned to London for a time and attempted to capitalize on his uncle's fame there. He later returned to Germany, where Hitler eventually offered William a top-ranking position with the Nazis if William would renounce his British citizenship. William turned down the offer, fearing he'd be trapped in Germany in the coming conflict. No longer caring to ask for a job or high-ranking position, William subsequently began trying to blackmail his uncle, threatening to tell the media stories about Hitler and his family, including threatening to confirm a rumor that Hitler was the illegitimate grandson of the Jewish merchant Leopold Frankenberger if Hitler wouldn't give him money. As you might imagine, this didn't sit well with Hitler, and William was forced to flee back to England, though some reports say he was given a sizable sum before leaving. Just before the start of World War II, William and his mother were invited to the United States at the invitation of famed publisher William Randolph Hearst. Hearst then sponsored William on a nationwide lecture tour titled My Uncle Adolf, where William would tell stories about Hitler and the Nazis to audiences. Once war broke out, William tried to join the British forces but was denied. When the US eventually entered the war, he appealed to President Roosevelt to be allowed to join the US forces, stating why he felt he wasn't being allowed to serve in the British forces as such. The British are an insular people, and while they are kind and courteous, it is my impression, rightly or wrongly, that they could not in the long term feel overly cordial or sympathetic towards an individual bearing the name I do. Roosevelt turned the matter over to the FBI, who eventually decided to allow William to join the US Navy despite being a British citizen and a nephew of Hitler. He served in the Navy as a hospital corpsman and was discharged in 1947 after 3 years of service. After the war, William married and moved to Long Island, where he set up his own blood sample analysis business. William had 4 sons, Alexander, Lewis, Howard, and Brian. 3 of them live in Long Island today. The 4th son, Howard, died in a car accident in 1989, 2 years after William died. 2 of his remaining sons live together and own a landscaping company, and the 3rd is a social worker, or perhaps all 3 are maybe retired at this point. Updates on this trio, as you might expect, are rather scarce given they like to keep a low profile, with the last, albeit brief update in 2018 when a reporter managed to get one of them, Alexander, to talk about his opinion on Trump. Not having much to say, he simply stated, "Some things that Trump says are all right." However, he stated he disliked the president. To quote Alexander, "It's the way he does it that annoys me, and I just don't like liars." So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do smash that thumbs up button below and don't forget to subscribe. Also, please do check out our fantastic sponsor, Dashlane, who I'm linking to below. And thank you for watching.